Okay, so now we've got 3 pieces. We've got our bloomers, we've got our bodice, which is this bit with the point at the front, and we've actually got the skirt here as well that we're going to be working with. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold the skirt in half with right sides together, and we are going to put in 2 pins. We're going to match up that centre seam, that centre point there, make sure that's all together, and you've got a little notch where your join is, and we're going to put a pin just across there to hold it across at the top, and then I'd got a pin to mark my right side, and we're going to put a pin directly through the tailor's tack that we made earlier. So I've got a little cross on that side, I've got tufts of thread on this side. So that's a piece of fabric's been folded perfectly in half, and then we're going to sew down from the notch on the edge there, and we're going to stop on the tailor's tack and just reverse. So this is just going to be with a straight stitch. So locate where your notch is, start directly on top of that. I'm just going to take that first pin out because I don't want to sew over my pin. So let's just reverse at the top and then sew down and stop on that tailor's tack and reverse. Okay, let's just take those threads off. And now our tailor's tack has served its purpose, so we can pull our threads out for that. Some should come out, well, most of it should come out quite easily. Some of it doesn't sometimes, depending on how well we've sewn through it. But just pull on the odd threads and they should just pull out for you. But you definitely won't get a mark on your fabric with this. If anything doesn't want to pull out, trim it on one side as close as you can to your fabric without going through. And then you should be able to go onto the other side and pull anything out that is left over. Just make sure there's nothing left on the inside either of your tailor's tack. Once you've done that, you're going to take where the fold of the fabric is and you're going to press that with your fingers just back against to the seam line you've just sewn. So all of your edges, your raw edges, should match. So if you look, that's the pleat open. There's my fold point just there, the lowest point of that V shape. And then I'm just going to smidge that across so that there's equal fabric on either side. Just see how my edges there don't want to match up perfectly. Just lift them up slightly and just make sure that that all wants to match. Once you've done that and got all those edges correct, just a little bit of fiddling just to get that right. Let's just put a pin on either edge of that, just to hold it flat. We'll do one at a time and then we come over to this one. Make sure the back is correct first. And this is where I say if you're doing this Playsuit in a quilting cotton, you'd have a much easier time with it because quilting cotton doesn't bounce around as much as taffeta does. It's the polyester content in it just makes it more bouncy. Okay, so there's our two pins just holding that together. That's it from the other side. Look, you get like this is called a box pleat, and you get like this box edge just there. And then we're going to just put this into the machine, and just at just a couple of millimeters in, you don't want to go past your seam allowance. We're just going to put some tacking stitches just to hold that pleat flat for us. So just less than your seam allowance. Take out your first pin, don't need to reverse, just sew down to there where that seam was, needle in your work, and then just change direction to come out the other side. Just till you come off your pleat, and then you'll be done. And it'll just hold it, and we won't have to take those stitches out because they'll be within the seam allowance. So there's our pleat on the front, looking all lovely. And now what we're going to do is we're going to neaten all of the edges of the skirt apart from this top edge, so the 2 side seams and the bottom. And then we are going to then press this up with a 3 centimetre hem. Let me just check. Yep, 3 centimetre hem, and fuse the hemming tape in place. Now, in order not to get a ridge on here, I think what I might do is just fold over a small amount of my hem, and then just turn it up. So if I turn over 0.5 centimetre, and then rather than a 3 centimetre hem, I'm going to do a 2.5 centimetre hem. But let me just find our supplies in our kit, because there's some hemming tape in here. Sorry for the crinkling. especially if you're wearing headphones. Got to shake out all of those 2, 4, 6 buttons, that's right. There for the jacket. Oh, we've got our little press studs there. Let's put those to one side too. And let's just check the width of this tape here. Right, so the fusible tape, right, getting ahead of myself. So this out of your kit is something that used to have a trade name of Wonderweb if you were from the 80s when I was younger. And what it is, it's a very, very fine mesh, for want of a better phrase, of little glue strands. And what happens is we can use this on delicate fabrics in order to turn up a hem where the fabric would show the stitches if you were to do it by hand, or by machine. So what we're going to do is when we make our hem, we're going to put this fusible tape underneath it, and then when we use the iron to press it down, it's going to melt the glue that are on these little gossamer strands here, and that's going to then hold that hem in place. The one thing that you've got to be really careful is that you don't iron in or press in a crease in your fabric with this in place, because you won't be able to undo it in order to straighten it out. So we'll take that nice and steady when we have to do that, but that's what we're going to do next. So let's just start with our zigzagging. So I'm not going to zigzag the bottom, I'm just going to zigzag the 2 short sides, because I don't want to ridge when I press with my iron for the thread. So let's just go ahead and turn this onto a neatening stitch. And there is a knot just there. And I'm not going to break my thread off, I'm just going to pull the other side of the skirt around, and I'm just going to go one side onto the other. Oops. Sorry, my machine just keeps jumping on that. I'm going to take off any whiskers. You see I've got little whiskers just here. I'm going to take off anything like that just to neaten up that edge. Just make sure there's nothing sticking out. Make sure the seam is nice and flat. And I'm also just going to snip through those threads holding the 2 sides together. So what it just says, finish the side seams with using an overlock or a zigzag stitch, then press the hem up by 3 centimetres and use fusible hemming tape to fix in place. So this is a good place for us to be able to press our pleat as well. We'll talk about doing that. So let's just switch off our sewing machine for a second. Let's move that out the way. Let's get our iron in place, and I will get set up and then we'll get on to ironing. Okay, so let's just take our iron and our pressing cloth, and let's just give these side seams just a little press, just where we've zigzagged them, just to hold that down nice and flat. We can also just press in this pleat slightly. Let's just lay that down, and let's just fold our fabric so that it's all laying all nice together down that centre of that fold. I'm not going to press on the hem, just on this top section here, just to hold the pleat in place for us whilst we're working with it in the gathers. Just hopefully starting that off. Let's just turn that over to make sure that's all sitting nicely. There it is. And whilst we're here, we can also just press the seam allowance on the bloomers as well, just to make that nice and neat, because we've not had a chance to press that before. Okay, so I've done the centre front. We can't really get in to do the centre back because it's too much of a curve. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our bodice and we're going to put it right sides down, so have you pleated the back of your pleat up, and we're going to measure 3 centimetres. And if I put my pressing mat sideways, I can get across more. And we're going to measure up a 3 centimetre hem. So I'm going to use my sliding gauge here. do 3 centimetres. So I'm going to turn up 3 centimetres first, and then I'll turn back down again that 1/2 centimetre to give us that extra nice edge. And that way we shouldn't get a ridge on the top of our hem when we iron it. Because sometimes if you neaten the edges on a delicate fabric and then you press it afterwards when you've done a hem, sometimes you can see a ridge on the other side of your fabric, and we're trying to avoid that. So let's just go halfway with that for now. Using our press cloth again because we've got a delicate speciality fabric. We're just going to press that hem in there for the moment. So that's got one bit in. Let's take our pins out, give it a blow, let it just dry off. Then let's go on to our other section here, and let's then just, so kind of pressing in towards that centre where the pleat is, because it doesn't want to always sit quite straight. So do these longer sides first, let it cool off slightly, and then just check to make sure that you've got that 3 centimetre section right in the middle. It's gone over slightly, look. Just pull it down until you get to the right length. Keep checking, that's about right. It's because of the shape of it, because there's this pleat's been drawn. I mean, ideally, I think that really we could have done this pressing of the hem up before we'd sewn the pleat. That would make more sense to me to do it that way, because a flat piece of fabric without this shaping in it is much easier to press. So note to self, that would have been better to have done the hem first and then come back to the pleat afterwards. Okay, so once we've done that now, let's now go back again, and we're just going to turn over 1/2 centimetre. So we've got a 2.5 centimetre hem on this edge now. So let's make sure we've not taken over too much, otherwise our glue will show for our hemming tape. And I do like to put my pins into my pressing mat, because it does just help keep everything in line together. And if you look, I'm doing my pressing in towards my pleat in order to get that just right again. And then I'm going to use my press cloth again, and I'm just going to press in between those edges there. I'm not putting my tape on yet. Let's just get this hem just pretty much in place where we need it to be first. And then once you've done that, just take your pins out. Now that the crease has started to hold, using our pressing cloth again, just press it so that then, oops, it bounces out, as you can see. Yours hopefully won't bounce out like mine did, because you've seen mine do it. So again, let's put that pressing cloth over. Just give it that little extra press in place. This section just here has just tried to bounce out. Hold it with my fingers until I can get my iron to be close enough just to press it out. And you'll see as you're trying to press, it's just trying to jump out. Just do your best. Your best is always good enough for me, so don't you worry about that. So let's go down again on this side now. Move my skirt over to do the other side. And let's see if we can get a 2.5 centimetres seam on this edge here. Okay, you're getting the gist. We can always cut the hemming tape down if we need to as well, so don't worry too much about that. Just trying to get that neat edge if we can. A little bit of fraying going on here, so I'm just going to snip that off. So press that over again. You can see I've left the middle at the moment. I'm just doing the 2 sides to start off with. And then while that's in place, I'm just going to take my pins out while my iron is on it and close, so it's got less chance of jumping out on me. Okay. Then we're just going to go to the centre bit here. Let's turn that under. And do the same. You get the gist. I'll come back to you when we're about ready to put our tape in. So now we can see we've got our hem and we've got the edge folded under. So we're going to take our tape now. Now just be careful with this because this will stick wherever there's heat. So let's just run it along the inside. So I'm just going to peel back the edge of the hem. I'm going to make sure that the edges are turned over on my hem. I'm going to lay the tape carefully up to the edge, just right up to the edge. And turn it over, and that should hold that tape in place. You're trying to get it to the top of your hem but not over the top of the hem, if that makes sense. So let's just put a pin in place when we can. Use quite a few to hold it in place. And just feel with your finger to make sure you've got no creases underneath the back edge of that hem. Try and keep your Wonderweb tape, that glue tape, very, very flat as well, and right down into the bottom of that hem. Don't put your iron anywhere near this section here where you've got your tape out the side, otherwise you will ruin your garment. So again, we've just got that nice and flat, and let's just do a little bit at a time. Won't need much heat, it'll do really well. Just give it a moment just to dry, and then you can take your pins out. We'll give it a final pressing at the end, but let's just work a little bit at a time. So we're up to here, so let's put a pin in where we were up to, and then let's just work further down this section here. And we're just trying to catch that turn under, so the glue's going right up to the top. I'm not putting the glue underneath that 1/2 centimetre turnover. I'm using the glue to help to glue that down and in place. Again, fingers on just to make sure that everything's all nice and flat. And you're just going to work your way along. Take extra time while you're just going through this section in the front to make sure that that's all kept nice and flat. And as I say, just do a final check just to make sure everything's all lovely and smooth. And that's all pressed. Little blow just to cool it off a little bit. Let it all set. And then what you'll be left with is this hem just turned up really beautifully on the edge there. It does make your hem slightly stiff, so it's going to give it a little bit of poof on the skirt, but that's what we're looking for, that lovely smooth hem along the bottom there like that. And if you try and peel it away, you can sometimes just see a little bit of the glue on the top edge where the pins have been, but when I do a final press over, then that'll catch that down as well. So we're just catching down the tape at the moment to the hem. So go away all the way to the edge. When you get to the edge, snip your tape off and then save this because you'll need this for your opera coat. And then we'll just come back to you once we've got this all the way along the edge. But where we started from the two edges and worked to the middle, when we were doing the skirt to start off with, you'll need to work towards where your pleat is, although I'm hoping that I've put a message on the screen to say do this section first before you put your pleat in, because I think you'll find it much easier to work with if you do it that way round. And then we'll then come back to me and we'll talk about putting this all together. Okay, so here's my hem all the way along. The next thing I'm just going to do, it isn't in the instructions, but I think it'll look really nice, is if we just press in this pleat on the hem. So we're just going to follow down. Let's perhaps, I want to do it on the front first, really. You're trying to make sure that the edges of your pleat down here are the same distance as the pleat's edges at the top here. And you want your edges to be together, and it to sit really smart and straight across the edge there. And you want the bits here that are open, just in there, you're sort of following that seam line down there from the front pleat as if it was stitched, and you want those edges to butt up to each other but not to cross over. So again, just use your fingers just to smooth it, and then I'm just going to hold it in place because we're going to just press this pleat in to give that a lovely, lovely pleat down the front. Let's just press that in. Because if we now look how nicely that's all sitting on the front there. Just nice and crisp, isn't it? And it's just put that lovely pleat in at the bottom. Okay, extra step that you don't need to do, but we have done. So the next thing that we're going to do then is we are going to take our front of our trousers here. So this is the bit without the opening. And we're going to match up this pleat here with the centre of that seam there. So the seam for your pleat goes on top of the seam for the centre front of your trousers. So let's match that up and put a pin in. Now what I want you to notice is that at the point of this, where this pleat is, there's a dip in the fabric. So you've got a very slight V front, which is going to be matching the V front here. It's not so pronounced on the skirt, but it's quite pronounced on the bodice. And so we do need to be aware of where that point is so that we can change direction directly on top of that and go down. We can't sew this pleat straight across with the point of the bodice. I'll show you what I mean, but let's just carry on along here first. So let's just match up the edges of the skirt and the trousers into one. This is where we're joining it all together to make a playsuit. Make sure your raw edges are together. It's easy for taffeta to slip. And I think we leave 1 centimetre free at the back. Let me just have a little look just to make sure I'm telling you correctly. Yes, so have your last pin 1 centimetre, and that's a little bit too much, so a little bit less, 1 centimetre from the edge. Yeah. Then let's go to the other side. And then let's, starting at the centre front, let's lay these 2 edges together and go along. I hope you're enjoying stitching with me. If you're not a subscriber already to my channel and you enjoy my content, I would love it if you would just hit that subscribe button, please. I'm chasing 4,000 subscribers. I can't believe I've got 4,000 of you still enjoying my content. I am absolutely thrilled, so thank you so, so much. But if you're not a subscriber just yet and you wouldn't mind, it doesn't cost anything, it just means that you like my channel, then it will just help me immensely. Thank you so, so much. Okay, so we've got that together. Oh, let's measure our 1 centimetre from the end here. Now I've got a little dip on my stitching just here where the fabric dips. Let's just make sure I get that absolutely matching up perfectly. 1 centimetre in, and let's put a pin to stop. Just make sure they're all together. Oh, it dropped slightly. You see, it does, just the fabric does drop on you. Okay, so there we are. We've got our trousers on the right side of our trousers out, and we've got the wrong side of the skirt against the right side of the trousers, so that when you look at them, you've got the right sides out on both parts of your garment. And we're just going to put this in the machine, and we're just going to run a row of stitches just very close to the edge, just attaching these together, but we're going to leave that 1 centimetre loose on the start and stop edge. So just with a straight stitch, start that first stitch just 1 centimetre in from the edge. Hold on to your threads to start. I'm not reversing and stopping because it's just a little stay stitch. It's just going to mean these 2 edges are held together so that when we come to do the next section, we don't have to worry about these 2 separating when we don't want them to. So you're just sewing within your seam allowance, so less than 1/4 inch. And when we get down to the centre front, I'm sewing from the inside. When I get onto that stitching line for the centre front seam, I'm going to stop and change direction. I'm not going to sew straight across. I need to preserve that little point as much as possible. So I'm coming close, take my time, look out for where it's going to stop. 1 more stitch, that's it. Then press the foot up, needle in the work, and I'm going to just twist my work slightly so that then I can just change that direction and come out the other side. Make sure your raw edges are together. Less than 1/4 inch seam allowance. You could do this by hand if you wanted to. It's quite quick and easy. You can also lengthen your stitch if you wanted to as well at this point. Just because it's easier if you do ever see any on the other side then to be able to take those out. And then we've got to stop on that pin, remember, there is a little notch there. You don't need to reverse. Take the stitch, your needle up, and then we'll take our threads off. Take our starting and stopping threads off. Okay, so once we've got our skirt and our bloomers joined together, we're going to start and look for where we started that tacking stitch, which is 1 centimetre from the edge, and we're going to make our 2 rows of gathering stitches all the way to the front. We're going to start at this side seam and we're going to stop at this edge of the pleat, so where the pleat is here, we're going to stop our gathering stitches, and then we're going to do the same on this side, starting from the pleat, going to the edge. We're not going to go all the way across the front here. We need to have 2 separate areas of gathering, one on the left and one on the right. So I've changed my thread back over to my contrast colour for my gathering stitches, and I'm going to make my first row of gathering. Oh, we need to just take down our tension on our stitches to make our stitches looser, and I'm also going to increase my stitch length to a 3. So let's just, no reversing, make sure you've got some threads to pull because this is a gathering stitch, and now we're going to just do our gathering stitches, first row, and I'm going to stop at that point of that pleat on the front. Go. Leave some threads for gathering, pulling up for later, and then we're going to put this back in again, and we're going to do exactly the same but with a gap between the 2 rows of stitching. And again, you see that curling over in front of me, the thread's just got caught at the underneath. Cut that through. Make sure nothing's caught underneath it. Down to that point. Okay. So there's my 2 rows of stitching on the left hand side. And starting and stopping at the V at the front. Putting those threads out of the way, put it back into the machine. This time starting at the V. We're just going to sew. Don't go too fast, otherwise you'll go off the edge like I nearly did just then. Okay, so when we've finished at this point here, we've got loose threads in the centre, either side of the pleat, as you can see there, and then we've got our threads at the edge here. So what we're going to do now, let's find our bobbin threads and separate those out, and just start to gather those up towards the centre pleat. And we're going to again gather in from both edges. Whenever I'm gathering, I don't gather all the way to one edge. I always gather into the centre point of my gathering stitches, and this is a little bit stiffer because we've got more layers of fabric than we had when we were doing the cuffs on the bloomers. And then the 2 bobbin threads there. And then just gather those up. Just do it gently, you don't want to be snapping your stitches. And there we've got that side gathered up, and let's just do the same on the other side now. And eventually we're going to get this to match the bodice, but just for now, we're just going to gather those up, just like we did before, holding on to the threads and then just moving the fabric along the gathers, along to the edge here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do now, we're going to work on one side of the bodice at a time. We're going to find the point of our bodice and we're going to match it. So if you imagine, let's just have a think about this. That was my chalk pencil. Got some white thread in here. What we're going to do is, let's just, at this point here, on this V, let's give us a starting and stopping point, just for our pinning. So I'm going to take the V point here. You can't see it very well, can you, when it's on a dark fabric on a dark thing. So we're going to take the V of the bodice here. I've opened it out. Now in the book, Sarah does say to do both of these edges together, but I'm going to do it slightly differently just to give you a nicer finish. So we're going to open the bodice out so that we're working on the inside, and we're just going to measure down that 1/4 inch from the point and give us a starting and stopping point. Sometimes difficult to draw on fabric. We can always do a tailor's tack if we want to. So if you see, I've got a little white tailor's tack, well, not little chalk mark just there, look. And it's 1/4 inch down from that point. That's going to be my starting and stopping point for my pinning. So I want that 1/4 inch mark to be directly on top of the seam in the centre. So I'm going to put a pin through there to start off with, through that chalk mark. And then I'm going to go 1/4 inch down on my front, and I'm going to put my pin in just there through the centre. I can then, so that's how that's looking. You can see there's the bodice, there's the pin through the chalk mark, and it's going. And you can see that the two seams want to go sideways, different. So you've got the seams of the bodice here and the seams of the skirt. So this is why we're working on one side at a time. Just take this bodice and twist it towards, I'm going to do my left first, depends which side you are, and just match the raw edge of the bodice against the raw edge of the skirt section, we'll call it. I know it's got the bloomers attached, but we'll just call it the skirt. So that now has just pivoted that start and stop point along. What we're going to do then is go along to the edge here. Let me just have a think if we need to do anything here before we start and stop. And we're going to find the 1 centimetre mark on our, let me just have a think. I think that ends up moving inside there. Hold on a second, let me just have a think, because I want to make this nice and neat for you, and the instructions are not going to give me the finish I want. So hold on a second, let me just work out how to do it nicely, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've just taken a moment just to have a consideration of the instructions, because I think this is a bit that might have confused some of you. So when we are going to be joining the skirt edges into the bodice, we need to make sure that we've not got these neatened edges on the on view, if you like. We want to try and hide those. So what I've done is I've gone back to my pattern, and where the opening is, you can see I've put a zigzag stitch along and neatened that opening section just here. Let me show you on the pattern, because I think that might be easier to understand. So if you remember, on the back of the bloomers, we've got this little section here where it juts out into the pattern. There's a little bit of extra fabric along there, isn't there? We've got our notch at the top as well. And I've just neatened that edge there. I didn't neaten it at the same time as here because we didn't want to lose that step, because we need that little step there in order to move forward. Put against here, you can probably see it. I can zoom in, can't I? And there's our step. So I've neatened that edge. And then what I've done is I want to finger press that across to the right side of your bloomers. Now it's going to feel like it should go the other way, but it doesn't. It goes inside the bloomers to the right side. So let's go on to our garment here. So there's our step for our fabric. Zigzagged that edge there. Oh, I've got a little whisker. Let me just take that little whisker off, because I don't need any fraying. And then up to that notch point, I'm just going to fold that in and finger press it with my fingers. Just run my nails across it, just down to the opening and then up to that point there. That's gone to the right side, so you can see we've got the, there's the seam between the legs of our trousers, and that's been pushed to the right side. Then look at your skirt edge. So go to your skirt edge, and we're going to turn in that 1 centimetre again to that gathering line, and it's going to go backwards like that, and we're just going to finger press that to the edge there. So when you then lay these two edges on top of each other, the two folded edges for those seam allowances come together. At the top it's just straight, that's fine. And at the moment it's going to feel a bit clumsy, just bear with it. So that's what we're going to do. So the seam allowances are going to be, those neatened edges are going to be pushed together, but they're not attached to each other, and they're not attached down onto the garment, okay? But it's going to give you this edge where you've got your gathering stitches that are going over to the edge there, and then we can gather through. This is because when we want to attach the bodice, and I know you've got a raw edge here, just ignore that raw edge at the moment. When we attach the bodice on, we want that to be a nice smooth transition all the way down the back of this dress. and this Playsuit. And so what we need to do is neaten these edges and fold them in to give us that folded edge first. Okay, so that's one side done and just finger pressed over. Let's go to the other side, seam allowance, fold it in towards the right side of the fabric, and then onto the skirt, and then the skirt gets folded in towards the wrong side here. If I was making this again and not following the instructions and doing it Claire's way, I would do it slightly differently. And what I would do is I would neaten this side and the edge hem here first before I start to do this section. But it is what it is. It's going to be a pet hate for mine that you might see that, but just try and do your centimetre seam allowance on the bottom there. Fold it all up. Okay, try and just not go past your notch on the edge. Okay, and then those edges are just going to just fold them up as neatly as you can do into that inside section. Let's put a pin on just to hold those in place. This feels clumsy to me. I'm not happy, but we'll do what we do because we're trying to follow the instructions in the book for you. So there's a pin holding those folded edges in. Let's come back to this other side and let's just fold these edges in here. Oops. So just hold it for us now. Now, let's go back to where I was, which is I had jumped ahead and then come back to this. So what I've done is I have measured down on the point. So here's our bodice. So I've opened up the bodice to the inside, and on the inside of the front, I've measured down from this point 1/4 of an inch, and I've put a pencil mark. Let me just do that again because it's faded off slightly. Is what happens. You can put a tailor's tack if you wanted to. Just make that as clear as I can do. So there's my 1/4 of an inch mark just there. Chalk mark. What we're going to do is we're going to take a pin. We're going to go through that 1/4 of an inch mark, and then we're going to find our point. Let's just separate out these gathering threads either side. We're going to find the point where, match the point up to the front of the bodice, and we're going to go through and make sure we go through that stitching line, slightly off, on the front of the bodice at 1/4 of an inch down. Don't just put your pin through front to back at the moment, because then what I want you to do is we're going to work on one side at a time. We're going to pivot the bodice towards the left so that the raw edges of the gathering stitches, or the raw edge of the skirt and the bloomers, matches the raw edge of the bodice, and we're going to put a pin in. And we're going to carry on along. Just make sure your gathering threads are just out of the way so that you can use them. And what we're going to do then is we put one pin in just about 1 centimetre across, and then we're going to go to that raw edge that we've just created, that folded edge where that pin is, and we're going to match up the seam line of the bodice with the folded edge of the skirt and bloomers, and then we're going to move that pin and pin it right on that edge. Just watch your fingers. So that's right on the edge there. And then we can then adjust our gathering stitches. Probably try from this side here, it'd be easier to work with, until the edge of the skirt matches the edge of the bodice. So you're just tightening that up and just gathering that up a little bit more. That's about right for mine. And then when we're happy, just make sure those gathers are as even as possible and sitting smartly. And then we're just going to put some pins through to pin the two edges together. I do think this Playsuit would be really nice made in a quilting cotton, and it would be much easier to work with as well. I know taffeta is a nice Christmassy specialist fabric, but it would work in a whole host of other fabrics as well. Okay, so that's got that into there. So we're going to sew this side first because we've got this point on the front. We've got to what's called pivot at that section. So now that we've got this edge here all the way pinned on, I now want you to on this left side the bodice is right, is matching the right sides together, at that point there, don't take your pin out all the way, leave it in through that point and just sort of pin it down further down so that you've got it anchored in so it's not floating around. So we've got that through, but the where the pin goes into the bodice is on that 1/4 inch mark we made, and it's right on the stitches for the pleat. Just turn this so that it's sort of like inside out a bit, because I want to finish on that mark. So let's just make sure our gathers are straight. And on this edge here where we're going to start, which is where those folded edges are for the openings at the back, we're going to just pull the bodice section out one side so that it's flat, because that will give us a better starting point. So keep the seam allowances down. Take it off your zigzag stitch. We're going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Oh, bless you, that's my husband. And then we're going to then just take a couple of stitches forward and a couple of stitches back. And then we're going to put a needle in our work. Okay. Then we're going to take a deep breath, because what we're going to do now is going to start and roll this forward to us. And because we've got the gathers underneath us, because we want to watch how this bodice is behaving, then we need to just make sure that everything's sitting nice and flat. So again, we're going to concentrate on that 1 centimetre or 2 in front of the presser foot. And we're going to take a couple of stitches. We're going to stop and we're going to readjust, make sure the gathers are straight down. Then we're going to sew towards the pin and take the pin out, making sure that all edges are together still. We're going to roll it a little bit more towards us, make sure the gathers are nice and flat, make sure the bodice is nice and flat. And I'm sewing in between the two sides of the bodice. So I'm not sewing both sides of the bodice shut at this time. And we're coming up to the pin with the mark. So let's just roll it forward. Now I don't want to go one stitch past that mark. I want to land right on it, so be really careful. So keep the pin in right in until the last minute. So still stitch that forward. Take it nice and steady. Let's just go one stitch at a time, one stitch there. And now just reverse at the front. I'll show you how this looks. Starting stopping threads off. So we've got one side of the bodice is still loose, there's our point. And on the other side we've just stitched the skirt to the bodice. So for me to open this out and turn it the right way around, I'm just going to check that our gathers all look nice on the edge of here. I have got a flat spot towards the front of my Playsuit. I'm not going to worry too much about that because that's where the pleat is. I can't see on Sarah's, I think she has it gathered all the way up, but I don't mind that the gathers are mostly to the sides here. You can choose. And so we've got finishing right on that edge. Let's have a look at my stitching just here. So there's my chalk mark. And can you see my stitches have just stopped straight away on there? What we're going to do now is we're going to do the other side before we take any gathering stitches out or anything. We're going to now take this edge here of the bodice, and we're going to take it straight away to where the pin is on the folded edges of our seam allowances at the openings, and we're going to pinch that together, open out the bodice, and we're going to just pin those together on the edge, right on the very edge there. So that's got that bit anchored down. Now we're already anchored at the point, but what we need to do now is we need to pull the fabric round slightly so that the raw edge again is straight on the centre of that bodice. So you've got a point there, and we're just pulling the edges of the seam allowance up to make it straight. Now it's not going to sit flat on the other side. I'll show you. So on the other side I've got a little bit of a ridge there. That will get sewn in and it will just it'll sit right in the end, as long as we start and stop on that edge there. So we're just pulling the rest of the fabric out. So I'm taking so on the inside, I'm taking the seam allowance and I'm just pulling it to one side to make sure that this side of the skirt is straight. Let me just put another pin in just there because I can get that absolutely perfectly straight. If you're not sure about any of this, with any of these sewing tutorials, watch forward to see what you think the end result should be, and then you can watch back again to see how it was achieved, and sometimes that can help it click. I know that helps with me sometimes. So again, I'm going to take my threads from the bobbin threads, and I'm going to gather this up because now we've got the centre front and we've got the edge matched up. We now gather up until the gathering matches on the skirt. It's a little bit stiff because you're going through all those layers, matches the same length as the bodice. Match your raw edges together, and then you can put a pin or two in just to hold that steady for you for whilst you're sewing. Oops. Just make sure all of your pleats are going to lie straight down. You don't want them folded up underneath themselves. Nearly there, folks. Just keep holding your breath. You're going to be there. It's going to all be okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put this back into the machine, but this time with the skirt pulled so that it's nice and straight. Can you see how straight? So I've got a fold in my fabric on the other side of the skirt that we've already sewn. Don't worry about that. And we've got our raw edges and our gathers all together. I've still got a flat section on the centre front, but I don't mind that. It's up to you. If you want to gather all the way up to the centre front, you can do. And then I'm going to put it in the machine so that I start sewing right on top of that chalk mark I made and at the very end of the stitches that we've already sewn for that seam. So I'm just going to push everything inside towards the middle because that helps me when I'm just dealing with it. The other side of the bodice is still free at the moment. So again, let's locate that start point first with our needle. And I'm going to take a stitch forward, 2 stitches forward and 2 stitches back, making sure that I don't go past, needling my work. Take out that first pin, holding everything right, and then I'm going to start now and concentrate on my gathers and make sure that my gathers are all straight down. And then we're going to just sew with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, stopping every so often just to make sure everything's all sitting nicely. Just keep rolling it towards you as you're stitching. And then remember, on the bodice, we're going to just pull that top side of the bodice out so that we can stitch just right up to that very edge on the seam allowance. And then once we get there, we're just going to reverse. Okay, we can breathe again. Let's take our starting and stopping threads off and our finishing threads. And then what we should be able to do then is turn this through to the right side. And when we fold up the front of our bodice to expose where we are, we should have the V on the bodice pointing to the seam line on the pleats and then going off the other side. So we've kept that V intact on our stitching. Hopefully you can see that. So now I'm just checking my stitches to make sure that everything's okay. I think I've just got to just do a little bit there. The stitches have just, sorry, the gathers have just popped out there. This side is okay. So let me just show you how to correct that if that happens to you. I'm going to need your quick unpick. We're going to, I've kept my gathering stitches in. That's why I never take my gathering stitches out until I've checked it. We're going to find where we've got the little fold, and I can see a little raw edge of gathering there. I'll pinch it and go to the inside. Take out 1 or 2 stitches either side of where you are. Of where that little sort of error is, if you like. And then once you're there, we can now fold that fabric so that that fold comes back up again. I didn't need to undo many stitches, just a few, just to hold that, just to be able to pull that section back up again. Make sure it's folded in towards the centre. And I'm just going to pop this back into my machine and just do a few stitches over that gap that I've created. So join up my stitches, so start a little way forward, little way back, take those threads off, and now if I look, that's all fine, everything's okay. There's a little bit of fray in there, but that's okay, that's not the stitches. So once I'm happy now that all of my gathers are correct, we can go and we can take out our threads. So if I cut these off this side and just pull on my bobbin, one bobbin thread at a time, then this should all pull out quite nicely for us. Sometimes it doesn't if we've gone over the gathering stitches. Just take it out as far as you can do, and then you can always use your quick unpick just to take out anything else that's needed. Just be careful you don't pull any threads on your fabric while you're doing this. So just going to remove those gathering threads now, and then we're going to have a look and see where we're at with our garment and see where we are. We'll look at those edges that we neatened earlier on as well. Okay, back to you in a second. We're going to, I've kept my gathering stitches in, that's why I never take my gathering stitches out until I've checked it. We're going to find where we've got the little fold, and I can see a little raw edge of gathering there. I'll pinch it and go to the inside. Take out 1 or 2 stitches either side of where you are. Of where that little sort of error is, if you like. And then once you're there, we can now fold that fabric so that that fold comes back up again. I didn't need to undo many stitches, just a few, just to hold that, just to be able to pull that section back up again. Make sure it's folded in towards the centre. And I'm just going to pop this back into my machine and just do a few stitches over that gap that I've created. So join up my stitches, so start a little way forward, little way back, take those threads off, and now if I look, that's all fine, everything's okay. There's a little bit of fray in there, but that's okay, that's not the stitches. So once I'm happy now that all of my gathers are correct, we can go and we can take out our threads. So if I cut these off this side and just pull on my bobbin, one bobbin thread at a time, then this should all pull out quite nicely for us. Sometimes it doesn't if we've gone over the gathering stitches. Just take it out as far as you can do, and then you can always use your quick unpick just to take out anything else that's needed. Just be careful you don't pull any threads on your fabric while you're doing this. Remove those gathering threads now, and then we're going to have a look and see where we're at with our garment and see where we are. We'll look at those edges that we neatened earlier on as well. Okay, back to you in a second. Okay, so that's all of my gathering threads out for now. So let's have a look here. So we've got a nice straight, if we just fold that bodice back inside for the moment, we've got the point at the front of our bodice, and that's just finished off really nicely just there. And at the back here, we've got the edges where those folds are in, and that's going to tie in nicely with the edge of our bodice front. Because what happens now is if you just pull out the edges of your bodice and you fold over that seam allowance, you can encapsulate, it's a big word, isn't it? You can fold over the seam allowance so that it's the same back and front and back, and put a pin along the edge. So we're folding under the edge on the inside of the bodice, and that's going to then cover up and enclose your gather points. So let's just carry on down. So it's going to be a little bit different on the front here, so because we're going to have a little point going that way and then a little point going that way and that way. Makes sense. So we're going to mimic that point on the front of the bodice on the inside just by folding over the seam allowance and popping a pin on that centre point. That's it. And then just carry along your edge, just turn under your bodice, edge on your bodice, and then attach it, pin it with pins just to the gathers of the skirt. And then I'm going to hand sew this shut. And that will be the neatest way of dealing with this. So there we go, so it's just turned under. So then go to the other side. So here's our bodice again, where we've joined that folded edge. So if you turn under your edge of your bodice first, about 1/4 inch, and then if you push that seam allowance up inside the bodice with your thumb, you can then wrap around the folded edge on the bottom of the bodice to enclose all of those gathers. And what it'll give you is a lovely neat finish on the inside. I think when Sarah was doing the instructions, she had you tack the 2 bodice pieces together. So you, if you were following it by the instructions, you would have the gathers visible on the inside, and I don't like that. That's not a finish I like. So that's why we're going just this extra step, just to make it lovely on the inside, because why shouldn't we? We should try to make everything as lovely as we can. And then just pop that pin in. And then we're going down towards the centre front again on the front here. We've already dealt with the point by folding one seam allowance in, then the other, and attaching there. So now this should also just lie nice and flat, and that should give us a nice edge just to go under there and just to attach that. And then, as I say, I'm just going to take just a few moments just to hand stitch this all shut, and that will give us a nice finish on the inside. Now we've still got to deal with the skirt, and we've still got to sew that, but first of all let's just hand sew this section and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I've just finished hand stitching this on the inside. It was quite tough because you've got a few layers of taffeta to go through, and it doesn't enjoy going through the needle very much. So what we're going to do now is, this is how it's looking on the outside, with the legs coming down like that and the pleat on the front. And on the back, we've still got this skirt open that we need to deal with now. So what we're going to do is take the 2 ends of the skirt and put them together so that we've got the right sides together. We're going to match up the end of the skirt so it's a lovely straight edge on that hem. And we're going to put a pin in there just to hold those 2 edges together. And then we're going to come up to where the notch is, which on mine is there. And we're going to put another pin on the notch just there. We're going to sew this with, I think it's with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. Let me just have a little check. Yes, 1 centimetre seam allowance. And then we're going to have a look and see how that's looking. And then you'll see why the neatening on the back then makes sense, hopefully. So let's just start here. So a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back. And let's stop and take that pin out and needle in the work. So just where we are, right, raw edges are together. Stop where the pin is and then just reverse back. I'll take off our start stuffing threads. So on the back of the skirt then, I want you to just press out that hem and just press it with your fingers. So open that seam allowance up and just press it with your fingers like that. That'll help it. This you can leave, but I think I'm going to just put with my stitches, and I know that it's difficult stitching through this taffeta. I just want to tack that seam allowance down because I don't want it flapping around, for want of a better phrase. So I'm just going to start inside my hem and just take a stitch through that and onto the seam allowance. Let's put my glasses on just so I can see what I'm doing. And then just going through the hem only, I'm just doing a few little stitches, just holding the seam allowance down. And my stitches aren't going to be particularly pretty, but hopefully they'll get masked in with that zigzag stitch. Just need a few fibres of the taffeta because it's quite strong. I was off screen, sorry, my apologies. and especially down to this section here. Just make sure that when you look on the right side, you've not got your seam allowance poking out like that. You want to have it really neat inside. Just sort of like tack it slightly up if you can do inside the skirt, just to hold it so that it looks nice. I'm just going through the through a few fibres on that glued down hem just to catch this fabric, so you can't see it on the inside, on the outside look. And then I'm going to just then take a few stitches through the seam allowance only, just to sort of like knot off my thread, just to take that up, leave a long tail and pinch it off there, and just do the same on the other side. And this will just neaten, it's just these little extra little bits that just will neaten up the overall effect of the whole garment. Okay, so let's turn this all round the right way round, shall we? So there's that hem just tacked down, that seam allowance down, so that's nice and open. So here's the back of our, so this is the bit we were trying to work out before trying to neaten. And I think I will put some stitches down mine, even though it's hard to sew with this. So what I'm going to do is just put those two folded edges together on the opening. Can you see from the edge of the bodice? I don't want this sort of like poking out. So for me, I want those two edges there to just be stitched down like that. And I'll just do like a little ladder stitch just down there, or a slip stitch just to hold those together, just working on the very edges. So just put a pin in for now, and you'll see the difference. If I pin it, you'll see the difference as to what I'm talking about. So what I want is this folded edge here to be nice, whereas can you see this side where I've not folded it in and tacked it down? You can see all of the neatening, and you could argue that once it's on, you won't notice that section. So it's purely optional, because we're going to sew a press stud on the back of there in order that this then can be neatened, can be set down. But for me, that just feels a bit messy. So while we folded it in, I will just want to pin that into the sides there, and I'll just put a few stitches down just along that folded edge there, just to hold it together. If you're not bothered about that, don't worry about it. You don't have to do it. It's just me being a bit careful and wanting a nice finish after we've gone to all the trouble on this. Okay, so I'm just coming to the bottom of that opening, and I'm just going to carry on down until the stop of those stitches just there. And then I'm going to I won't go up the other side. I'm going to cast off my stitches by just sewing my thread to the seam allowance, in order that then we treat the other side as a completely separate piece. Because sometimes if you try and go down and then up again, you'll get a jig in your stitching, and we don't want that. We want that to sit perfectly straight on the back of this garment. So it's a bit like finishing it, for a zip? A little bit. So I'll just take another stitch here on the fold. Make sure that's fine, and we can press this as well just to try and get it to stick. As we know with what we've been pressing so far, it doesn't really want to press very nicely, does it? This taffeta tends to be a bit bouncy. So we can just open this up now. Let's just go through into the inside of the garment underneath there, and there should be a little gap that we can see. Put your needle through without taking a stitch and just hand it to your other hand. And then on the same side that you're working with, make sure your stitches are together, because mine have opened out slightly. Make sure I've not gathered it up. No, that's really nice. Okay. And then I'm just going to take a couple of stitches just through the seam allowance only on the inside, just to cast this thread off. So again, there once we've pressed this, remember, once we've pressed that, that's the difference between that, and that's the open one where you can see all of your seam allowance. So hopefully you can see that that's an improvement. So I'll carry on doing the second to do the last one here, and then all we've got to do then is sew on our press stud at the back, and the back on here, and then that will then hold that on. That'll be lovely and neat, and we'll be all finished. Okay, so I've got my sides all sewn down. I haven't pressed it yet, but we can do that in a second. And then what I've got is I've got some press studs. Don't know what you might call them snap fasteners if you're in the States. It's just these little things here. So one's got a little noggin on it and one's got a little hole on it. And then when they're sewn on, they clip together and just hold things together. So these are quite small. So I'm actually going to put 2 on mine. But obviously if you've got a bigger one that you want to use, depending on your preference, then you can use 2 instead. And all that we have to do, put a knot in my end of my thread, and whilst it should be right over left for women, this edge here is nicer on mine, so I'm actually going to do left over right. This is where it's your garment, it's your choice. So I just sort of sew it over like that so I know which side everything needs to go on to. So I'm going to sew the ones with the points on just on this side of the fabric. I tell you what we'll do first as well. Let's just try it on our character just to make sure we know how much room we've got. Hold on. We've got 2 characters we're going to try it on to. Let's try it on Luna first and see how it fits. Let's put her feet through the cuffs. The cuffs feel quite tight. Oh no, they're all right once their feet are through. Let's pop this onto Luna. You're going to look very smart, Luna, in this. I haven't got a Freya, so I can't put it onto Freya. But let's put it onto Luna just to see how it fits on her. So these straps here at the back here, this just ties in a knot behind her neck. Let's just do that as a double knot just there like that. So that looks nice. It's a halter neck top. There we go, that's for that. And that fits quite nicely around her chest and under her arms. Fits nicely around her bottom, and we've just got room to put those press studs on just on the back there. So that's going to look nice. So the room I was using for putting the press studs on will be fine. But let's just try it on Ottoline, because Ottoline, when I take this off Luna, she is a little bit chunkier, a little bit better stuffed. Oops. Your feet, Luna. Let's put you there, Luna, for a second. So let's just try it, because she's got the different, can you see the different ways that the legs are fitted? So whereas Luna's got the flat base and the legs are sewn into that flat base seam, then on Ottoline she's got the 3-part body, there's 3 sections there, and her leg joints are on the outside, so she's much, as I say, use the word chunkier, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. Or a disrespectful way, should I say. So let's just pop and just see if it fits, because the clothes are supposed to be interchangeable, but I do think those leg joints do make a difference. So her cuffs are quite a lot tighter on my Ottoline, so I might make the cuffs a little bit longer if I was making this for Ottoline. Or a character with the legs where they're slightly different. Sorry, Ottoline, don't mean to be pulling your toes off. So it fits over her tummy okay, and over her hips okay. So if I just pull up the skirt, we can see there's room on the hips there, which is great, because I was worried about that, but I didn't need to be. Let's pop this round your neck, Ottoline. Make you look nice and smart. Because part of what I do with doing this is if I find out these things that you need to know, then I can let you know before you start making it. So that's just sewn up, that's just taken around the back of her neck. So that's all fine. Let's just find the edges of the bodice. Right, so yes, we've got just a slight problem here with the bodice. Look, it doesn't want to meet at the back. Can you see? So what I would do if I was making this for an Ottoline, there's my bodice pattern piece. I would keep the skirt the same, although you could add a bit more on if you want, but I don't think in the way that the pattern was cut out on the kit fabric that you've got enough. But if you remember, I think on the cuff, I took off ½ an inch, didn't I? I would leave that on for the cuff and leave that as the right level. And you can always put your pattern piece around the leg of your character, allow for your seam allowance and just see how it feels. I did take some off mine to make it slightly tighter because I knew my Luna Lapin legs were a bit shorter. I mean, it does fit, but it's just a little bit snug on there. And if you feel like you want a bit more, just add a little bit extra, just extend those lines out and make this pattern piece just slightly longer. On the top here, in order to make this fit our character, you could either do a button and a loop if you wanted to, and it would just fit as it is, or what I would do is I would take this bodice pattern and I'd do the same as what I would do on the cuff. I would just extend this straight line out and that one out, and I'd add on probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch on both sides. Let's just measure what the difference is on mine. So there's 1 inch difference. So you need 1/2 an inch at least in order for it to meet, and then if you want it to wrap over, you're going to need that. So I'd add 3/4 of an inch onto my pattern piece just on this edge here, and then cut it out, and then that would then give the extra to enable it to go around Ottoline. Let me just measure her chest for you, so you can measure the chest of your Ottoline, and then you can adjust it accordingly. So if I just go over the top of her dress for now, my Ottoline is about 24 centimetres for her chest. Yeah, 24 centimetres, just under her arms and just around her chest on top of this garment. But it fits in the hip section well, so that's all good. And as I say, I'd just extend that pattern slightly there. You would have slightly less gathers on the sides, but I think you'd still be able to get away with it, and I still think it'd look nice. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Obviously, if you want to extend the pattern for the skirt and for the culottes, then you can, for the bloomers, then you can do. All I would do with that, with the bloomers, is I would just make a cut straight across, and then I'd use the slash and spread method that I've used on others, and I'd just move it out and probably add another inch in if you wanted to, and that would give you plenty of room then to have sufficient gathers. And the same on the skirt with the pleat. Oh no, that's the upper coat. That's the upper coat. This is the one with the pleat. I would again, where the notch is on the side here, I would slash and spread that, whoops, this way round, slash and spread that all the way down to the bottom, and then slash it and put another inch in. So just put an inch into both of those two, and then 3/4 of an inch on the back of there, and you should be fine for that. Right, so back to sewing our press studs on. I'm literally just going to sew those onto the back, and then I'll pop it back onto Luna again, and we can have a roundup. So I'm just finishing off these press studs now, and what I wanted just to show you was that I've managed to sew the tops on without coming through to the other side. Now you can, if you want to go through the other side and just hide it with some buttons if you wanted, but the way that I sew through mine is I take a small bite of the fabric and go through the hole on the press stud, and I just check on the other side to make sure I've not gone through. So I do that pretty much with every stitch. You do get better at it as you've practiced a bit more. Then I travel underneath between the two to the next hole. Make sure again I've not gone through. And then again I just use my needle just to pick up a few threads of that top layer of fabric, and that then gives you a little ridge that you can almost work with. You don't want to put it too tight. And then I just take 3 or 4 stitches through each one, and that way then you don't go through onto the other side. When I've done that, I then just take a stitch across to the next section, again making sure I've not gone through, and then take a couple of stitches just not through the actual hole on the press stud, but just through the base of the stitches on that section. And then to cast off, I just put my needle in close to the edge, travel through the inside of the part of the garment I'm sewing really, and pull my needle through, and that'll give a nice long end. Just put a bit of tension on your thread when you snip, and it'll pull it through for you. So there we are. So let's pop this onto Luna again, just so you can see the final garment. We tried it on for fit earlier, didn't we? But we can try it on now for the final. And the next garment I will be making will be the opera coat to finish off this complete outfit. So that will be coming next. Let's just get your tail in there, Luna. Just tie ties at the back here. I'm just doing it with a double knot. You can do with a bow if you want to. If it's long, it's not quite long enough, I don't think, for a bow, but for a double knot, it just looks quite nice at the back there. And the press to do it nicely. So there's our Luna looking all lovely. Take my glasses off, it'll be easier to see. And there's the back of the garment there, sitting nicely underneath her arms and sitting flat, as flat as it can do. Okay, so I'm not turning the camera around today because I've not got my makeup on, I've not done my hair, and I just want to get this one wrapped up for you because we've been waiting for so long. The other thing I just wanted to say is if you're not very happy with the V just at the front of your garment here, just remember that you could sew a button there, or you could sew some kind of diamante jewel there, or a little bit of a crystal there or something, just to hide it for you. I'm happy with mine, but obviously it just depends on you. But if you look at it and that's drawing your eye, just use something to cover it up. Just a pretty little button or something would look really nice on there, and it would just detract your eye then from your seam line. But the rest of it, I think, is looking pretty good. There's the bloomer section underneath. Oh, pull that trouser leg down for you, Luna. All attached into one, and so that's how that is. So a really big thank you again to Colleen Mulson Hughes as well for sponsoring the kit for me to bring this video to you. And I am sorry, Colleen, sincerely, for the length of time it's taken me in order to make this garment. I do apologise. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed stitching along with me. If you want to become a subscriber, I'd love to have you on board. If you'd leave me a comment, I'd really appreciate it, or give the video a thumbs up, because that all helps my channel and push it out to other people, other Luna lovers who might want to have a go at making this garment as well. Okay, thank you very much everybody for watching. I hope everything's all good with you. Lots of love to you all, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Bye.